I will not send the passport office a live ferret. I sound like Bart writing lines on the blackboard.
Anyway, welcome listeners.
9990 context.
Zero escape, zero context. That is the podcast in some ways.
In many ways it is. Hello, listener. We're both very tired and a little weird with it.
We're a little punch drunk. We're a little high on triumph. This is the last episode.
This is the last episode of this season. We are going to continue doing this project because it's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun, but we're going to have a break and read things that we chose to read on purpose.
Oh my gosh, I read Translation State recently and it was so nice to just read a book.
Oh my! I finished yesterday How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix, which I was telling you about, and it's so going in the hat. I enjoyed reading it so much, and yet it is so unhinged as a writing choice, like beginning to end. It's bizarre.
This sounds like our thing.
It's called Glove Puppets.
Menacing glove puppets.
Menacing glove puppets. Anyway.
Should we record an episode?
Yeah, do you want to talk about video games?
We haven't actually introduced ourselves. Hello, listener. Welcome to this somewhat chaotic last episode of season 1. This is Analysis Roulette. I am Duck. I use he, they pronouns.
I feel like there's a real end of term vibe happening.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to leave at 3.
I'm Dia. I use they, them pronouns, and this is Analysis Roulette's final episode of the series.
We are wearing our mufti.
Yeah.
We are watching the first half of Shrek instead of doing English class.
Oh, God. As the relationship between a person and the, 4 DVDs that their school had to show them at the end of term.
With the television on wheels.
Yeah, the ones that you've, committed to memory because you watched them at the end of so many
only the first
terms.
half. Only the first half.
No, I remember one year we begged our Latin teacher to let us start Hercules halfway through so we could watch the second half. And he was like, well, I guess if that's what you really want to do. We were like, yes, that's what we want to do so much.
We've seen the first half 6 times. We still don't know the ending.
None of us know how it ends.
Broadly the experience of playing Zero Escape.
It is. So, this episode is a little bit different. Regular listeners will know that what we usually do is we random select a school of analysis and we randomly select a media property and we have a go at it. This time, as our finale, we are doing a compare and contrast task. I'm not sure if this is a universal experience. It's very common in British schools. This is where you're given a couple of different texts and told to do an analysis of whatever form you like, just comparing these. And they'll have a couple of salient points of similarity and difference, usually. Mm-hmm. We've randomized that, so those salient points are not guaranteed.
We did not select our pieces for structural or thematic similarity.
No, this is not like in 6th form when they were like, yeah, compare and contrast Angela Carter's The Bloody Chamber with Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. And we were like, yeah, that fundamentally makes sense. We have selected to do a compare and contrast task with the musical Dear Evan Hansen and the video game Zero Escape, 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors.
Correct.
2 things that I suspect have never been compared before.
We're breaking new academic ground.
Call it that, sure.
I didn't say we were doing a good job at it, or that it was worthwhile ground. It's just that it is new.
I'm not sure it's ground.
We are paddling out to sea on our little academic raft.
I'm going to be honest. I did actually genuinely, while you were talking just there, Google, in quotes, Dear Evan Hansen and Zero Escape. And the only things that came up were a negative review of Dear Evan Hansen, in which someone had said there was Zero Escape. Mm-hmm. A novel I have never heard of, which just contains a character with the same name as Evan Hansen and the phrase Zero Escape, and one TV tropes page, which features
both of them is for something.
I mean, the fact that it's only one, frankly, is incredible to me.
We are pioneers of something.
And having just opened that, it is... Zero Escape is a comparison in an entry. It's not even an entry itself. So yeah, no one has compared these 2 things ever.
No one has compared these 2 things except us. And now you, listener.
So,
come with us on this journey.
Would you, Duck, like to explain 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors, or Dear Evan Hansen?
Whichever you'd like.
I mean, these are both new to you and only one of them is new to me, so I feel like you should get free choice.
I will do Evan Hansen because I feel more confident of not missing out vital parts of your analysis.
Let's go.
So, Dear Evan Hansen is a relatively new musical. It was critically acclaimed, won a bunch of awards, got turned into a movie, which is getting turned into a movie in the first few years of existing is doing extremely well for a stage musical.
Yeah.
It's not quite your classic Broadway musical in that there is nothing. So when you think of a big musical, you think of a certain amount of scope to what's going on and a likelihood of some degree of like big dance pieces and chorus work, of which there's very little in Dear Evan Hansen. This is not. This is a little bit avant-garde on that front. It's
Yeah.
very focused on doing, almost all of the music is representing either a soliloquy or a dialogue,
Mm.
rather than someone's internal thoughts with a background of everyone else also singing and dancing. There's just not a lot of that in it. And it is, in scope, one very lonely high school kid accidentally getting himself caught up in a web of lies and then deliberately extending it because it's nice to get the attention. And then it all comes crashing down around him. And he kind of goes back to normal life at the end. Like, the long-term consequences of this are everybody is like, you fucked up, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gets better therapy and goes off to college. More or less. Like, it's social consequence. And then he leaves high school and it doesn't really follow him.
Yeah. Given that we have two media properties, I will say I think we should maybe go a little bit more into the naming characters and giving plot details in the summary at the beginning, because otherwise people are going to get
No, that's
extremely
fair.
confused.
So our hero is is Evan Hansen himself.
Yep,
And the name, it gets used in its full form a lot.
it does.
He's hardly ever Evan, even in his own thoughts. He's Evan Hansen.
It's a
And
surprisingly non-rhythmic name for a musical theatre character, to be honest.
yeah, it is.
It's quite hard to sing quickly.
And then I'm having my usual bad at names problem. Who's the dead kid?
Connor Murphy.
Connor Murphy. So Connor Murphy.
Connor Murphy, yes, I
Yeah,
am.
yeah.
That's the
So
only way I know their names is remembering bits of lyric.
Evan is at high school with a slightly troubled teen who smokes weed and doesn't get along with his family and generally is aware that he has a combination of emotional problems and awareness that he is fucking up his life, which is Connor Murphy.
Yeah.
Who I believe kills himself.
Yes.
It's not like car accident. He actually he dies by suicide. Having the day before he does that, he has a little minor bullying altercation with Evan where he steals one of Evan's therapeutically mandated letters to himself, and it has it on him when his body is found, which leads everyone to believe that this is a real letter from Connor to Evan, and therefore they must have been friends. And Evan fails to say, no, he was bullying me.
Yeah.
He stole my therapy letter.
Production to production, Evan's motivations, they're usually fairly innocent, but they range from pure-hearted, I don't want people to know that find out that their son was bullying me right after he died, to, oh, I have no script for this social interaction.
Yes. And honestly, I can see it. Like, this is the part where, up to this point, I'm like, I could see me, especially at 17, having this exact conversation where I fail to explain, and then having to have a future conversation where I explain, possibly to a grown-up, who can go and explain to the parents
Yeah.
the misunderstanding. But I feel like at some point, I would explain. What Evan does instead is consult with his friend Jared, who is awful.
Yeah. Not a
Just
good influence.
not a good influence, not fun to hang out with.
Very clear that he's not Evan's friend. He insists he's not Evan's friend, which makes it very strange that he is the person Evan goes to.
Right, he keeps saying, I'm not your friend, and Evan's like, well, you're the only one I've got. So you
You
are.
are my confidant.
Yeah. And Jared is like, just roll with it, dude. Just roll with it. This is bad advice. And then we have a sequence of awkward dinner parties where Evan is fake reminiscing about his friendship with Connor. He is trying to get involved with Connor's sister, a girl he has basically never spoken to,
Yeah. Zoe.
Zoe. And Zoe is falling for it, possibly just because she's recently bereaved, and here is somebody who is taking an interest in her and reframing her brother, who was awful to her, as maybe not entirely awful.
There
Like
is
maybe Connor,
a specific song where he
yeah.
lists all of the
Evan is
nice things Connor said about her.
Evan is it's really gross because he's putting into Connor's mouth all of the things that he, Evan, thinks are cool about Zoe.
Some are quite physical, which is a bit weird.
Yeah, but you know, Zoe is falling for the scam. Everyone's falling for the scam. The scam escalates into running a GoFundMe for a memorial orchard.
Yeah.
He
This
gets
is
roped into giving a speech,
one of his
as part of which he
early
announces this
lies.
memorial orchard.
One of his early lies was that the orchard was very important to Connor and that it was somewhere that they had, like, bonded.
Yeah, they
And
went and
by
hang
what
out
appears
there.
to be blind luck, it is also somewhere Connor had visited with his family, I think?
Yeah.
So when, he gets roped into doing charity work with a girl at his school who is also, I think, sort of struggling with her mental health and very keen to sort of do something good with all of these feelings,
Yes,
which I think is very
basically.
relatable to a
And sort of
teenager.
convincing herself in a slightly different way to Evan, but still convincing herself that Connor is very important and she has personal connection to this, rather than it just being a sad thing that has happened that she was peripherally near.
Yeah, which is extremely accurate to a mentally ill child. Like,
Right. If you feel real bad and then something happens that can provide a justification for feeling real bad, it is very human to go, that's why I feel real bad. Now my feeling bad is validated and also is something that I could potentially do something about because it has
and
a cause.
everything will all be, like, worth it in some way if I do something important with Connor's death,
Right. So
which is
she's
how Alana, this girl, sort of ends up being the one to push Evan to give a
yes.
big speech about how much
Because
Connor meant to
crucially,
him.
Alana is also being lied to. Alana does not know that Evan is lying. Jared knows he's
No,
lying. Alana
no,
thinks
not
it's
at
all
all.
true. So she's bought into the tragedy narrative because she doesn't know otherwise, and Jared is going along because he thinks it's funny.
Jared sucks, by the way.
Jared sucks. He really does.
He's
So
17, but he sucks.
it becomes a sort of flash in the pan viral phenomenon of people watching this video of Evan's speech and donating to this fundraiser. And then it all falls apart as Evan's mum finally gets the time off work to come to dinner with Evan and with Connor's family and has a combination. None of this is true, and also he's not an orphan and we're not that hard up for money. Stop trying to adopt him and give him money. This is
Yeah.
actually very insulting from you and from him that he's sort of moving into the space that your son had.
Mhm.
Because Evan is in the position she's divorced. She's raising him as a single mother. So they are not hard up for money in the sense of poor. They are hard up for money in the sense of Evan is probably going to college in state rather than to a prestigious one.
Yeah.
Like he may be going to community college or the nearest college that he can get a discount for rather than a college of his free choice.
Yeah.
It's very much middle class hard up.
Yeah. There's no question that he's going to college.
Right, exactly. He's not looking at, well, my friends, or my, schoolmates will all go to college and I will get a job. He's looking at, I'm going to have to go somewhere fairly cheap.
Yeah, and he's not alone in his peers in this. Like, Connor and Zoe's family is relatively wealthy, but his mother and Jared's work together. It's not, none of the other kids are implied to be spectacularly
Yeah.
wealthy compared to him.
So there is a financial advantage to getting charity off Connor's parents, but it's not a necessity. Like, his mother is
Yeah.
entirely correct. He doesn't need this. This is a nice to have.
Yeah.
And then it all comes out and it all falls apart and Connor feels extremely sorry for himself and Zoe breaks up with him, obviously.
So you would?
And Alana is like, you piece of shit, and built the orchard anyway. And Jared is like, I just said it would be funny, dude. Learns nothing from
Yeah.
any of this. Jared does not grow as a person.
Jared gets multiple lines in the like "screw you, Connor" chorus number, which is
Right, where he's like,
incredible.
you are using me, and I'm like, I don't. Went into this on purpose. You are the one who is not being lied to in any way.
Like, Jared, what are you talking about?
You signed up for this. And that's sort of the whole story. Is it's this kid who semi-accidentally, semi-embracing the potential to just get some attention, or to avoid letting this family down. That actually their son didn't have any friends after all. As you say, it depends on the production as to which way they kind of lean that take. But it is this kid who falls into this web of lies. It snowballs, and then it falls apart. And he grows as a person enough to at least actually engage with his therapy and to believe that it is possible for him to have friends and be happy, even if possibly he should get out of high school first.
Yeah.
Which, true of many, many of us. School is not
And
a
I
good
think
place
he
for friendship.
definitely learns not to do this specific thing ever
He
again.
learns an important lesson about not building webs of lies about how the imaginary version of yourself was best friends with the imaginary version of someone else who is no longer here to contradict you.
Yeah, and definitely if you do start those webs of lies, maybe don't try to get a girlfriend or free college out of it.
Mm-hmm. I personally really like the songs in Dear Evan Hansen. I think the
There are
songs
some
are
bangers. Yeah.
there are some bangers. Um, the show as a whole, I find a little bit secondhand embarrassment. I mean, that's deliberate. That's not an artistic criticism.
Mm.
You are supposed to be watching these dinners and cringing. It's just I don't enjoy that feeling. So they achieve what they set out to, and I'm like, can we stop having this dinner party? This is terrible.
The dinner party scenes, plural, are pretty excruciating.
Right. So I prefer the soundtrack to the show as a whole, partly because it is leaning on an emotional aspect that I don't particularly find recreational. And I do think it's doing some interesting stuff with having very good musical numbers, but not having the big song and dance pieces in the same way. And it won a bunch of awards, and it will probably keep being revived every so often as a successful musical does.
Yeah. I definitely also remember when it came out, I listened to a couple of the songs, the ones that everyone listened to, the title number and Good For You. I remember
Good for
particularly
You is very
absolutely
good.
loving. Good For You is fantastic.
Everyone in song is just like, you piece of shit. It's wonderful.
Yeah. The Dear Evan, it is called Dear Evan Hansen, isn't it?
There's one called Dear Evan Hansen, I
Yeah, the title
think.
song,
Yeah.
is just genuinely like a bop. It feels like it's from a like slightly more peppy Heathers. It's really fun. Um, I personally didn't really connect with the show because I found the premise just a little bit too off-putting to really get into it, but none of the things that I dislike about it are, like, bad.
Right, similarly. I'm like,
Yeah. None of
this
the
is not
choices.
particularly written for me personally, but I think it's well written.
Yeah, there are issues with it, which I might get into later. There are things that I think are not good, but I think it is the show it tried to be.
Which is one of the measures of artistic success, is did you intend to make this?
Yeah. I will say I think the movie version dropped a couple of balls, but it's not the worst movie musical ever made. Probably.
That is... I'm putting it in, not in the hat, but in the we could do a bonus episode of what is the worst movie musical ever made. We won't discuss
I
that
would
now. We
love
might
that.
discuss that at a
Let's do
later
it.
time.
Yeah, I can make you watch some old movie musicals.
Oh no. How
You're gonna
dreadful.
love Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
I feel like I've actually seen it. Not in a way where I remember it, in a way where I think age 10
No,
or 11 it might have been played on the
yeah,
TV.
it's one of those ones that definitely used to be on Channel 5 a lot before we had more than 5 channels
I
in
did
this
have a
country.
home tape watched almost to death of Calamity Jane.
Calamity Jane is great.
And as a tiny, confused trans butch child, I had a lot of feelings about Calamity Jane, which I did not understand.
Yeah, I think, for me personally, Singing in the Rain is not just my favorite movie musical, it's one of my favorite musicals of all time and one of my favorite movies of all time. Like,
And
it's
I've
hitting
never
all the
seen it.
buttons. Yeah, I am gonna make you watch that if I have to come to your house and physically, like, hold the screen in front of your face. It's
I
just
can
so
also be
good.
bribed. You don't have to go to these extremes.
Singing in the Rain is fantastic. But yeah, there are other contenders for the worst movie musical ever.
Which we will discuss at a later time.
I'm just saying, we're focusing on the stage show. I might bring in a couple of references to the movie because I watched this for this episode and I'm getting something out of it because I didn't get any pleasure.
That's fair. That's fair.
But yeah, that's Dear Evan Hansen. We are comparing it with the visual novel 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors, which is the first installment in the Zero Escape series.
Mhm.
A little bit of context. It's a click and point escape room sort of visual novel style puzzle. So it's a game where about half of the content comes to you in the form of the visual novel sequences, which are, not quite cutscenes in the modern sense. Anyone who doesn't play these, it's more
No, lightly
dialogue.
animated. Yeah, lightly animated dialogue.
Yeah. There's like 1 or 2 animated sequences in the entire thing.
Yeah, a lot of the time it's just you cut between people's faces as they're talking and some slight jiggling of the features because it's animated within the game engine rather than being a video cutscene. It's a Nintendo DS game from quite a long time ago, so it's not working on high-level graphic hardware.
Yep. Later installments in the series did introduce cutscenes. I've actually only played the first 2, which are the ones that don't, because I prefer the visual novel format and I never got round to the rest of them. But yeah, those are about half the novel sections. The other half is click and point escape room games, which I said before, I'm not a huge video game person. I will say click and point escape room with horror elements was my jam when I had internet access as a child. I loved that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
were some really good click and point horror games available in like various Flash sites back in the day. They were great. Love them.
Escape rooms before they were a thing in the real world were a thing in video games, and they were good.
They were good. I think these are pretty good puzzles, but they're not super relevant to the analysis except in how they
Yeah, they
form the
don't.
plot.
There is very much a discontinuity between the game that is the bits of the game you can play and the bits of the game you can read. There's an aesthetic continuation, but the gameplay really is a puzzle has been set up for you. Open drawers and take things off walls and compare the number on the back of the painting to the number on the door handle.
Crucially,
Until you perform the arbitrary set of actions which will open the door.
yeah, but crucially, this is true in universe as well. So let's get
Yes,
into the plot.
they are representing exactly the puzzles they are.
Yeah. 999, I'm going to call it for short, follows a Japanese young adult called Junpei who comes home, realizes that his window is open. When he goes to close the window, he sees a creepy figure in a gas mask reflected behind him. It's a great shot. Then blacks out and wakes up in a flooding boat cabin wearing a weird sort of Apple Watch looking thing with a number 5 on it. This is the first escape room. You escape and you meet the rest of the cast. So there are 8 other passengers, all of whom have a similar bracelet with a number on it. They are told over a loudspeaker by a mysterious figure called Zero that they're all now participants in something called a nonary game.
Yes.
Essentially, they have to complete all of these puzzles to escape the boat before some bombs go off and they sink. The boat is flooding as they speak, so it's clearly already sinking a little bit. And the way they complete these puzzles is by entering rooms in groups. For mathematical reasons, only certain groups of people can go together using the wristbands to scan in.
Arbitrary constraint.
Yep. Somebody attempts to go through the door by getting everybody to scan and then going without them, and they learn that if you do that, you get exploded by a bomb in your head, Suicide Squad style.
Yep. This upsets everyone.
Nobody likes that. So they proceed through the puzzles. I'm not going to go through that much of the plot in linear order because the plot doesn't really happen in linear order. This is a video game, so you can go down different avenues of choices depending on which room you go into with which people and get different paths. As you proceed through the game, you unlock your first path and then your second, and these each unlocks a different ending. You have to unlock some endings to then unlock other options in-game. So as you're playing through, say, your 3rd or 4th playthrough,
Yeah,
you
can
may have
go different ways
options.
and do different things.
You can go different ways and do different things, and crucially, you can also do things that rely on the knowledge that you, the player, have from previous endings that the
Yes.
character Junpei does not have.
Yeah. There are some clues that don't really relate to the puzzles you're doing. They relate to the overall plot.
Yes. As you're going through this, you're solving your puzzles. A sequence of events is fairly unchanged between, which includes one of the other players, Snake, and an unidentified person showing up dead at one point. Towards the beginning, you've also discovered that one of the other players is your childhood friend, who is from that point onwards known as June. They've all taken code names to avoid knowing each other's identities.
It's honestly, it rang true to me as that here are a bunch of extreme of people who've been put in a paranoia-inducing situation. They have decided to use code names. This is not logically necessary, but it's the sort of thing confused, paranoid people do. Sure,
Yeah,
I'll roll
so
with it.
they all pick names based on the number on their watch thing. So there's uh
It's
June, who
Ace, Snake,
yeah, yeah.
Clover.
In
Yeah,
order, it's Ace for one, Snake as in Snake Eyes for two, um 3 is Santa, coming
San
from
is 3 in
San,
Japanese.
meaning 3. Yep. 4 is Clover, 4-leaf clover. 5 is Junpei, who's accidentally given them his name, so doesn't get a code name.
June outs him. It's very funny.
Yes. June is 6. Yes, 6
Yeah,
months. I
June
can
is
count.
6.
7 is a guy called Seven. He doesn't go into the cutesy code names.
Right, he's like,
Then
you can call me 7. I
Lotus,
appreciate this.
a woman called Lotus is 8, and then 9 is the guy who exploded himself, so never gets a code name. They just call him the Ninth Man.
Yeah,
We're not going to need all of these people, but it's just more convenient to name them all now, so it's less confusing later if I refer back
right.
to any of
So
them.
at least we have said the names.
Yeah, those are the people. There's also an unnamed man who shows up dead. But yeah, so as you go through this sequence of puzzles, these references keep coming up that don't really make sense to theories about the sort of what happened to the Titanic, to ancient Egyptian princesses being entombed in mystery science ice, and specifically to Rupert Sheldrake's theory of morphic resonance, which is a parapsychological theory about how psychic powers might actually work and how they might really exist in nature.
Yeah.
None of these things really make that much sense in context. They are all clues for when you are on your next playthrough round, and that just keeps on happening as you go
Yeah.
through the
You
game.
keep finding weird things that are clearly it's fairly well designed on the it was fairly obvious to me when I was finding a weird thing that was going to relate to what was actually happening versus this is a sequence of numbers I'm going to need for this room.
Yes. And a lot of these weirder clues are coming from dialogue with the other characters, who, despite the fact that you've all woken up in this mystery situation, all seem to know something about what's going on that you, Junpei, have no idea about.
Junpei is absolutely confused at all times.
Junpei
And I
has
love that
no
for him.
idea what's happening. Everyone else is giving cryptic details. Even the person who has amnesia is giving cryptic details and knows more than
Right.
Junpei.
And Junpei is like, I found a banana level of contributing.
He's doing his best, but everyone else seems to know a lot about this situation and also about how to solve these puzzles. They're all weirdly good at it. Mysteryful.
Strange. Strange.
Interesting. Yes. So, eventually, as you've played through a sufficient number of different versions of the story with different characters getting to the escape
Mhm.
and different characters dying along the way, you can eventually unlock the true ending, which is the one that I'm going to go through in actual detail.
Yeah.
This is where you learn that there has been, so you've learned through the course of your storytelling that this has all happened before. A long time ago, 9 pairs of kidnapped siblings were separated, with half of them being put on the Gigantic, which is a sister ship to the Titanic,
Mhm.
and sent out to the ocean, and the other half being put in a mock up building in Nevada.
Logical
Um,
place to put.
Everything is legal in Nevada. And the idea of this was it was a scientific experiment to explore morphic fields to help a truly deranged billionaire cure his prosopagnosia, which is
Right,
face
which I have
blindness.
to say is such a insufficient motivation.
To be fair, action you share with the other characters in universe, so I'll allow it. Like the other characters also think this is a bad motivation for torturing children.
Right, and like I understand wanting to cure your prosopagnosia. Is it worth murder games?
If you are a sufficiently sociopathic rich guy,
You are already a billionaire. You could just make everyone who ever comes into your presence wear a color-coded tie.
I think my impression
I
of
feel
Ace
like it's a
is that
problem you could solve with money if you have that much money.
I actually I this is maybe already getting into analysis. My reading on Ace, who is the billionaire rich dude with
Yeah.
prosopagnosia and also the number one player, is that it's not so much that the prosopagnosia is a issue for him, it's that he cannot accept that there is something incurably wrong with him because he needs to be perfect because he's a
Yeah.
rich dude with an ego.
It's about his personal flaws and being unable to accept that he's having a limitation.
Yeah. But yes,
I would
all
just
of
use
the
my money to get everyone to wear a silly hat.
it transpires well, that's why you haven't killed any children.
It's one of many reasons.
But yes, it's transpired that everybody else in the ship, apart from like Junpei, was involved in some way in the previous game.
Right.
So the
Well,
pairs
all
who
the
are
rest of
together,
them are like, all of this is happening again, and he's like, "Who are you people?" Because
yeah,
he is a very confused bean.
Santa and June, who are siblings, were in the game. Clover and Snake, who are siblings, were in the game. Lotus's kids, who are
Yep.
siblings, were in the game. Seven is the I think FBI, some sort of Secret
Some
Service
sort of
agent,
yeah,
cop
detective
adjacent dude
situation.
who rescued the kids that had been kidnapped into the ship, not the
Yep.
desert. Yes, the ship. Um, Ace and the Ninth Man were both the evil scientists organizing this whole thing.
Running it. Right.
Yep. Everybody except Junpei was involved in some way.
Yeah. Junpei is also here.
Junpei is a childhood friend of June, but has no other connection to the game.
Yeah.
And it turns out that when this experiment happened, there was a mix-up, and Akane and her brother Santa were accidentally both placed in the same experiment, meaning that they couldn't do any psychic beaming of answers to one
So
another
not
because
only
they were in the same place.
not only are you using a facility in Nevada, an antique ocean liner, and 18 kidnapped children to perform a deadly experiment to try and cure your prosopagnosia, but you're doing it incompetently?
Even make that mistake, like do a
You
head
have
count.
you have 18 subjects in 9 pairs.
Like even Home
One of each
Alone had
pair
an
goes on the
extra
boat.
kid to cause confusion.
One of each pair goes on the boat, one of each pair goes in the laboratory. How do you make the mistake of, oh, I accidentally put both of them on the ship? My opinion of this gentleman is plummeting, and it was not high to start with.
Back to the previous Nonary games.
Mhm.
Um, so when they successfully puzzled their way through the whole thing, with presumably Santa and Akane being basically dead weight because they cannot do any psychic stuff.
Right, because the whole theory here is that the solutions to the puzzles have been given to the kids who are in Nevada for them to psychically beam across the world to their siblings who were on the boat to save their lives.
Yes. And when they get to the end of the sort of ship slash fake ship, etc., um, Ace, who is on site for this experiment for some reason, grabs Akane, drags her into an incinerator, and tries to force her to solve a final puzzle to escape, presumably not realizing that she doesn't have anyone to beam psychic information
Right,
to
no,
her.
no one is giving her the solution to the puzzle, so she's just in an incinerator actually trying to solve a puzzle solve. It is the
Yes.
world's most tense Sudoku, and I'm not kidding.
The puzzle is a Sudoku puzzle with no instructions, and because she's like 7, she's never seen one before, so she has literally no way of solving it. There's nothing she can do. She
She
just
doesn't
burns
know
to
what
death.
to do with this grid of numbers, and she dies in an incinerator.
Yes. However, because of psychic powers and morphic resonance, she's successfully connected not with her brother in well,
Also on the boat.
also on the boat, but not with her brother who should be in Nevada, but with Junpei in the future in Nevada.
Right.
Which means that she successfully escapes, but in order for her to successfully escape and not die in a fire,
She has
they
to
have to
close the
set
time
up
loop.
this entire time loop so that Junpei will be in that situation to solve the puzzle and send back the answers in time.
Yeah.
So
He
this
has to be
entire
there
thing,
to get the answer, to send the answer back to her, for her to set it up for him to be there.
And also, all of the other endings have to happen first because he has to know about the psychic experiment and Baby June and all of that.
Yeah.
And it turns out that Zero, the evil person who locked them all in this ship, etc., was June the entire time with support from Santa.
Yeah.
They all successfully escape, only the evil people have died. It turns out that Snake was alive, and actually that was a different corpse, not important. Um,
Yeah.
and they all ride off into the sunset with an Egyptian priestess who they found in the basement.
Right, who is also here through no fault of her own.
Yeah, she's just here. But yes, that is roughly the plot. I've skipped pretty much all of the between bits which are like actual puzzle solving and world building to just skip to the end because otherwise we would be here for 6 hours, but that is roughly the plot of 999.
Yeah. Yep. It's remarkably complex for a little point and click puzzle solver for the Nintendo DS.
Yeah, I was given it, and by given it I mean physically given the DS to play it on for like a
Mhm.
2-week loan by a friend when I was about 19 who absolutely loved it, and I was like, okay, you were right, this is that good. Fair
This
play.
does in fact slap.
This is great. It's also it's just a really good puzzle. Like in terms of like if you're playing brain turned on, you're not just doing the point and click, you're actively trying to work out the time loop shenanigans, especially I will say if you're familiar with like psychic and time loop plots. It's a really easy one to solve, but a very satisfying one to solve.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's at no point difficult, but it's very narratively like payoff heavy.
Yes. Yeah. There's once you go through all these multiple pathways and get all the multiple endings, the actual underlying story is, rewardingly complex.
Yeah, and it does use a lot of like really cool real world like ideas and concepts, and like none of it is to do with actually solving prosopagnosia, but it is real parapsychology.
Yeah,
Morphic
it's
fields are a
none of
real
it is
thing
to
that
do with
people research.
this whole experiment is very tenuously connected to solving this problem.
Yeah, I
As
think
we've
you are
established,
supposed to
he's
take
an
it as read.
incompetent mad scientist.
You are supposed to take it as read that Ace is A, not a scientist, B, a criminal, and C, an awful human being.
Yes. He is bad and bad at this. The worst combination.
Yeah. But it does do some really great use of the medium. The use of the 2 screens of the Nintendo DS is actually one of the things that solved me from like, oh, that was fun to like, this was amazing writing.
Hmm.
It's revealed like when you do the Sudoku puzzle at the end, it turns out that like the bottom half of the screen has been the previous nonary game for some of the portion, that kind of thing. I'm just like, yes, this is amazing. I love it.
Right, which I didn't. I played one full playthrough and then read a lot of what was on the wiki, so I didn't get the full experience of like the true ending reveal.
Yeah,
But I got enough of the aesthetic of the game to appreciate what's going on there.
it's very satisfying. It's also like one that I was quite smug about, like feeling good at. It like does feel like good payoff. You feel smart getting it, even though they're not that complicated. Which is like,
Yeah,
a good thing for a game to do. It should feel rewarding to solve puzzles in puzzle games.
I'm with you there. I don't think that one should be controversial.
Yeah.
Playing the game should be fun.
Yes. It should make you feel glad that you solved the puzzle. Also, Clover is Bay. I love her so much. She's one of my favorite characters in anything ever.
She's pretty good.
I
I
love her.
really was enjoying hanging out with Ace, which I think would have made the experience of finding out that not only is he terrible, but he's also bad at it. It would have made it hit even better, I think. It's also, I liked him as a character rather than as a person, I think.
Yeah. But that
It's
would
not
have
like,
made
oh,
that
I want to be
fun.
friends with Ace. It was more of a,
I
oh yeah,
don't
I
want
want
to
to
be
see
friends
more of
with
this
any of
character
these
and,
people.
solve puzzles with this. I want this guy in the room as I do this puzzle solving game because he seems fun.
Actually, a lot of the puzzles are the same, and he made them. So he's got time to vamp.
He is just, hanging out, being weird with the kids.
But yes, I don't want to be friends with any of these people, and I think that's fine.
You don't need to
Um,
want to be friends with them. That's not what a game is for.
yeah. Um, I'm not going to talk much, much like with the movie. I'm not going to reference the sequels that much. They exist. I have played one of them. It was fine. It did not have me by the throat, particularly in the same way that 909 did, which is why I didn't play the third one.
Legit.
Um, the second one virtues are dropped at the end of this, but and also I like that it doesn't make you figure out the mechanisms again from the top. It just drops you straight in with like, yeah, time loops, psychic powers. You know this.
Obviously, these are just things that we all understand.
Yep. So let's talk compare and contrast.
Let us compare these Broadway musical and horror visual novel experiences.
So these are not the same medium. They are not from the same decade. They are not from the same continent.
All correct.
However, I think that they do have some broad overlap in terms of themes and some interesting contrasts in how they utilize them, which is how I'm going to do this. So,
Mm.
what I thought I would do is I'm going to go through my little list of things that I think thematically resonate between the two properties. And then towards the end, we're going to tie it in a bow by asking, okay, well, how do they differ in their presentation of these themes?
Sounds good.
Number one, themes of people doing horrible things for extremely dubiously justifiable ends.
Yeah, that is a big one. Both these stories are people doing making really bad choices on like a moral interpersonal level
Yeah.
for what seems insufficient reasons.
Yep.
Like, you didn't need to run a whole fundraiser based on your close personal connection to a child you were bullied by once. And you
Yeah.
did not need to torture all these kids.
No.
And that neither of these things needed to happen.
Thing is, if you presented either of these as a very black or white scenario, so listen to me, Evan Hansen, you have a choice. You can either make up an elaborate series of lies or tell these grieving parents to their faces that their son who just died by suicide was an asshole. If you boil it down to that simple a choice, we all can see why you would pick the first one.
Yeah. In the heat of the moment, you might be like, I'm just going to roll with this.
If you were to say to the average small child, a 9-year-old child, would you rather burn horribly to death right here and now, or have a lot of people have a very horrible day in the future? I think most people would understand the child who picked I would like to not be incinerated to death.
Yeah, absolutely. It's her actions in setting up the completion of the time loop. You can have a debate about, but they're not. They are debatable. Like, there is a debate to be had.
Absolutely.
Ace's decisions as the billionaire mastermind of the
Oh,
whole
we'll get
problem.
to Ace.
Different situation.
We'll get to Ace, but
We'll
right
get to
now
Ace.
we are
Okay,
looking at
we're comparing
children.
Akane with Evan Hansen,
Yeah.
and yes, I think in
Akane
both
and
those cases,
Santa
it's like,
and Evan Hansen and like maybe technically Jared, I guess, sort
yeah,
of,
it's
as
very much.
the accomplice.
I can see why you made the choices you did. It maybe wasn't the ideal choice. There
That
were
does
maybe
not.
other things you could have done to mitigate your actions than you actually did. But I
Crucially,
see why you went with this option.
and also crucially, both of these people are very young and don't seem to have anybody offering them any good advice.
Yes. There is nobody they have who they can talk to about this problem.
Yeah, nobody is sort of taking them by the hand and going like, okay, let's problem solve.
Right. No one is
There
saying,
might
okay, so
be
you've
other
had that.
solutions.
This is what you said. What can we do to make this better?
Yeah. However, crucially, by the end of both of these stories, nobody nobody has died as a result of these people's actions,
True.
except for like evil people.
Yeah.
But everybody involved is pretty traumatized and nobody wants to be their friend, and that's kind of just fine. Both properties end on a sort of note of like, yeah, we're all gonna have to live with that. Sorry, did my best. Bye.
Right. No, but nobody is happy with them, and they still don't have any friends at the end of it.
Yeah. In particular, both of these have strong themes of lying and deceit and why we do those things
Yeah.
and how that feels to us as the person doing them.
Yeah, and both of these things have more than one person who is lying through their teeth about the entire situation for different reasons.
This is the thing. If we compare someone like Ace and someone like Jared, both of them are in it for sheer personal profit. Jared actually starts like selling badges
He
in the
sells
play
merch.
of
Yeah.
like the dead schoolmate. I mean, look, it's not up there with like traumatizing a bunch of children and incinerating one to death, but it's still pretty evil.
Right. It is yeah, I'm with you on all of this. It is less bad than incinerating children, but it's pretty grim.
It is
Don't sell merch of your dead classmate.
don't lie to sell merch of your dead classmate. Like, selling merch of your dead classmate is already tacky and slightly evil. This entire lie to the deceased's family and all of your friends, and also, like, sort of egging on the pressure on Evan, who is whatever Jared says, Evan is kind of Jared's friend. And this is clearly a huge amount of psychological pressure on him that Jared is just stirring up more and more because it's funny and he can make money off it.
It's funny and he can sell merch.
It's
Do not
awful.
torture your friends in order to sell merch. Important moral lesson for you there.
Yeah. Um,
Torture your
again,
friends because it's funny.
not as bad as incinerating a child, but pretty bad.
Again, I agree. On the scale that we're working with here, Jared, not as bad as child murdering billionaire.
Like both of
Just
these
sort of sucky.
have characters who have done something pretty awful because it was the best thing they could think of to do in the moment, and the fallout of that is just going to be the fallout because they've made that decision and they're stuck with it.
Yeah, time continues to flow.
And both of them are kids, you know? Like, even not just like baby Akane in the incinerator, adult
No,
Akane is like college aged.
right, present day Akane is like, what, 19-ish?
Yeah, give or take.
Having had the sort of
Like,
life
Evan,
where she has previously been in an incinerator and only escaped through psychic messages from the future, which I
yeah,
feel like is hard to get therapy about.
probably, yeah. At least Dear Evan Hansen could get therapy. Who are you telling about your incinerator psychic trauma?
Exactly.
And it's also implied in the game that she remembers the timelines where she did get incinerated, because that's how the timelines in this work. They bleed into each other, which is horrifying to think about for even a second.
Right, all the paths where you don't get far enough to save her because you get murdered in other ways, she just dies in the past.
Yep.
Yes, this creates a paradox, but also it means that she dies horribly. So,
And also, it's not clear. She might be experiencing all of those double because past Akane and present June are both possibly experiencing having already died in a fire.
yeah, she's having a bad set of days.
That's not fun. Um, and again, crucially, these people are children, and it's really hard to hold it against either of them that they make bad decisions, but that doesn't negate the trauma that everybody around them is having inflicted on them because of this bad decision.
Yeah, however understandable, they really are messing things up for everyone else.
Yeah, like, I mean, especially the other kids, like people like Clover, who's younger, Snake and Santa, who are implied to only be in like their mid-20s and
Yeah.
went through it the first time as actual children. And then in Dear Evan Hansen, people like Zoe and Alana, they're also children and they're being pretty heavily traumatized
Right.
by
They're being
your
brought along
actions.
for this ride and they're not having a good time.
They are not having a good time, and they are all in a pretty tremulous mental situation.
Yeah, I
Mm,
agree. That seems like a parallel.
yeah. Theme number 2, while we're at it, the brutal and unfair death of children and the helplessness of their siblings and their parents in the aftermath of it.
Yeah, Dear Evan Hansen is about Evan Hansen, but Connor sure does appear for like 2 or 3 living scenes and then die off screen and reappear only as a sort of imagination ghost.
I actually think the imagination ghost of Connor is one of the things that. Okay, so this is where I'm going to talk briefly about the movie. The stage play, Connor shows up as a ghost like throughout.
Yeah.
This is pretty common. Like I said, I compared it to Heather's earlier. He really reminds me of Heather Fleming in Heather's, who shows up to sing about how cool it is that now that she's dead, everybody thinks she was awesome because nobody speaks ill of the dead,
Right.
which is fair.
It's a vibe.
Um, in the stage play version of Dear Evan Hansen, Connor shows up to sort of he shows up in imagined sequences by Evan, particularly in the
Yeah.
song Dear Evan Hansen, but
El-
also once or twice elsewhere.
Yeah, he comes out a lot of when Evan
But
is
he
either faking letters from him, he shows up to narrate them. When Evan is like reciting previous
yeah.
conversations, he shows up to do his part in that
But
imaginary
he does
flashback.
also show up kind of in this role as Evan's consciousness, his conscience, his kind of
Yeah, he does
thoughts he's
sometimes show up and be
repressing.
like, "What are you doing with my corpse here? Why are
Yeah.
you puppeting me? This sort of sucks."
It's kind of macabre. In the movie, he only shows up as the made up memory of the real Connor Murphy. So we get a minute of Connor Murphy bullying Evan Hansen, and then in the Dear Evan Hansen song number. He shows up as this extremely lively, engaging, charismatic. Like, the actor does a great job of making you love this guy, which does
Yeah.
make it really hit when the song ends and you go, oh yeah, that was all made up.
That was all fake.
That
was
was
all
not a guy.
completely invented.
That is a
This is
dead
just
child being puppeteered around
right. This is
by
Evan and Jared
Evan.
imagining what a nice friend would be like to have.
And also, crucially, it's extremely disrespectful. There's like a lot of raunchy jokes. There's a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of
this is
like
part of my issue with
kinky
Jared as a
teenagering.
character. Is that Jared
Yeah,
is in some ways the comic relief of this otherwise very embarrassment heavy situation, but also Jared is like a 17-year-old making incessant sex jokes. That's his comic
also incredibly
feature.
homophobic sex jokes.
Yeah, like his entire comic approach is make sex jokes all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's realistic, but
Sure, it's not at all.
I'm not here for
Unrealistic is not
realism.
the
This is
problem.
musical theatre.
Right, the problem is not that that's not how unpleasant 17-year-olds behave. It's that I don't want to hang out with unpleasant 17-year-olds with a fixation on sex jokes. That's the problem.
But I think the thing is, because you get so much less of Connor in the movie, it does make that one scene where you see the puppet Connor much more ghoulish in a weird way because you're not accustomed to
Yes,
this.
you don't have so much of exposure to sort of him on the stage as a presence, so it's just that the one time that he is like called up as a figment, it'll hit harder. That this is imaginary. This isn't. This is not even based on the real Connor Murphy. This is just made up.
It's really quite horrible in some ways. And I think it really makes it hit home that, yeah, he was a dick to Evan in the first 10 minutes, but like, this is a child who died by suicide and whose family is struggling to cope with that loss. And it's kind of that simple.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. And when I say he was bullying Evan, I mean in that encounter he is.
Yeah.
He gets a little physically threatening. He shouts a bunch and he steals Evan's therapy letter. And he does it because he thinks Evan is joining in with Jared to laugh at him.
Yeah.
You know, he is the aggressor in that conversation, but it's not like a sustained campaign. There is no kind of getting revenge on him by disrespecting his memory motivation. It is just, this is almost the only interaction they've ever had. It wasn't particularly good. But it's, yeah, the way Connor is acting in that scene is because he himself is kind of emotionally overwhelmed.
He is really struggling. The opening number of the stage show version, it's not in the movie, is this "Does Anybody Have a Map" song, which is
I
very
love
much
it.
about how
It's so good.
everyone, including the adults, has no idea what they're doing, and none of them know how to sort out their own lives, let alone help these kids who are struggling.
Yeah. All of them are just like, I'm trying to get through the day, and I know I'm doing it badly. I don't know how to do it better. That is
And
the story of everyone in the story, except possibly for Jared.
Jared is not trying to be better.
He is not trying to be better. He
Actually,
is
to be
just
fair, I don't think Zoe is trying to be better. I think Zoe has too much on to try to be better.
Zoe just has like a normal level of problems. She's
I
not
think
a
the thing
troubled
is,
kid. She's just a kid with a troubled brother and some not, some parents who are not unusually flawed, but not unusually wonderful. And she is just trying to make it to the end of the year.
yeah. By contrast, Zero Escape also is in a way about the ramifications of somebody becoming a ghoulish puppet version of their own dead body, except in this version, it's that person who has all of the agency. Until the second nonary game happens, Akane did die in that incinerator. But she's there the whole
Yeah,
time. She's her own
yeah,
ghost. She's with her brother plotting this elaborate self-rescue because she died back there.
right. She's at
Helpless.
school with Junpei and also dead.
Yeah. She's been dead ever since that traumatic thing that happened to her when she was a kid. And she's just puppeting herself about, making herself grow up to be old enough to bring everybody back to go through all of it again so that she can have never died to begin with.
In other words, she's trying to grow up and get therapy.
Exactly. They're all
Like,
just
w-
trying to
w-
become people.
there is a concept called adverse childhood experiences, and it is not an unfair description of what it feels like to have those. To be like, yeah, I'm already dead. I'm just sort of also here still.
And if I keep on being here for long enough, I can make it so I didn't die anymore.
Right, I can figure out how to have been alive all along, but right now I am already dead.
And crucially, the people around these dead and not dead at the same time children have no idea what to do. They're doing their best. Like, I think of all the characters in the Zero Escape game, my heart probably goes out the most to Santa because I cannot imagine a worse time. Just
Right, because he's not
being
dead.
the dog's body for your sister's ghost and being the one who has to go out and do the kidnapping and the building a well, presumably not building, but like repairing a fake
Right.
ship in the Nevada desert and like putting these people who you knew, who were with you when you were traumatized, like Snake in specific was like in the room when Santa watched his baby sister get incinerated. He's the one doing all of this so that his
Right.
baby sister won't be dead. But that's not going to change his experience of being
Right.
somebody whose baby
And
sister was
instead
incinerated.
and instead of being able to, for instance, meet back up with the person you shared a traumatic experience with and like talk about things in a healing way, you get to violently kidnap them and put them through it all over again.
Yep. Because otherwise your baby sister's going to have been dead the whole
Otherwise,
time.
she's going to stay having always been dead.
Similarly, that's the thing is, for Evan's lie, the sort of good thing that briefly came of it is that Connor's family got to briefly live in a world where there was something helping their son before he died. They
Yes.
got to briefly imagine that their son had this friendship that brought him happiness, that he was doing okay for a little while.
That he
And
had a good impact on other people as well.
the really brutal truth that they find out from Evan's deception is that that's not true. They had a kid who was struggling, who'd been in rehab, who was relapsing, and who eventually did commit suicide. And that bubble of light was never real, it never existed, and they don't get to keep it because, unlike the video game, this isn't genre fiction. Dead kids stay dead.
Yeah. They end up having to go back to the world where, no, he didn't have any friends and he didn't have a good impact on anyone around him. Which is not to say that he is, was an irredeemable person. He was
17.
he was a 17-year-old with emotional difficulties and an addiction.
Even
It's not
18-year-olds who
his
don't
fault.
have mental illnesses and addictions can like suck to be around sometimes because
Right.
being 17 is horrible
I
and
am
we all
not
deal with it
condemning
however
him
we
by
can.
saying I'm not condemning him by saying he didn't have a positive impact on the people around him who were also mostly 17 with problems. But one of the things that his family gets out of the lie is the belief that he was having a positive effect on Evan, that he was a bright point in someone else's life.
And that gets
And that turns
taken
out
away
to be
from them.
completely false.
That version of Connor was this kind of ghost in the machine that they got to briefly meet through Evan,
It's an imaginary friend with their son's face.
which is pretty haunting.
It's pretty grim. It's not a happy
Yeah,
story.
it's really not. Um, and this kind of does lead us into moving on from Connor's parents to his sister, the theme of complicated sibling bonds and how they
Yeah.
affect people. Because from Zoe's perspective, Connor was. It's implied to have been pretty awful to her. Like in the movie, there's some dialogue saying that he was physically aggressive with her. In both versions, she says that she just never felt like he even liked her as a person, let alone loved her as a sibling.
Hmm.
The first time she and Evan really bond is this song that I personally hate, but isn't musically bad. It just icks me. Um, where she kind of says like, "Well, what do you mean my brother did love me? He never showed me he loved me. He never said he loved me." And Evan goes, "No, no, he told me all these things he loved about you," and then sings about things he's noticed about Zoe that he thinks are cool or fun or lovable. This bothers me on several levels. One of them is just I find this a gross way to have your parent get together, but whatever. Sure. It's not a nice story, fine. But also, after all of this happens, that's another moment that she's going to be robbed of, and she's going to be left back at square one thinking, okay, well, was I right? Did my brother never love me? He's dead
Yeah.
now, so
All of
I
this
guess I'll
coming
never
to
know.
terms with maybe there was a secret love that he had for me, such that actually that repairs this idea of being siblings for me. Well, that's all just fake. Like the
Someone
only
made
good
that up,
things, the only good opinion that I've ever believed my brother had of me was a lie.
and it was a lie to have sex with her.
Yeah, yeah,
It was a lie from someone who fancied her. Like, this is the bit that for me is the most irredeemable about Evan Hansen, the character, is the relationship with Zoe. Is she's going to spend the rest of her life with whatever positive memories the relationship they had helped her build and sort of reconnect and think like, oh, things weren't that bad. He was a troubled kid, and like maybe he didn't show me he loved me, but I know there was something there. For the rest of her life, that is going to be tarnished with how much of that was a lie by this guy who wanted to get with me.
Yeah. Every my belief that perhaps my brother loved me was in fact a fantasy to get in my pants. Um, Zoe has this song called Requiem, which I really love,
Mm.
um, which sort of addresses head on the complicatedness of someone dies who you were supposed to love and who you are now supposed to claim loved you. And you didn't, and you don't think they did either. And
Yeah.
you can't really explain to the world at large how different it was from what they're imagining. It's a really good song. Go and listen to Requiem, listener, because
It is a
and
good
bear in
song.
mind all of that context because it's not all contained in the song.
It is a good song. It's also a great segue into how I think this ties back to 999, which
Hmm.
is these people were selected because they were siblings, separated,
Yep.
separately traumatized, reunited, and then just told to get on with the rest of their lives and never speak of this
Right.
again.
But post experiment, they are just, it is implied, put back.
Yeah. For Snake and Clover in particular, they are then brought back to the site of that trauma
Right.
and
Now do
find
it
out.
all again, which for me has always been one of the like really most horrifying horror tropes is the now do it all again.
I love a horror sequel. This is a first installment that is somehow also a horror sequel.
Right. It builds in the se- the sequality, the quality of being a sequel.
Yeah. Um, Honestly, it's kind of for me the like, especially like I said, especially Clover, who is actually a child still,
Mhm.
possibly the most evil thing that Akane and Santa have done.
It's not
Like
good.
the
I
people
cannot
they
approve of it.
murdered were people who like incinerate hair that they killed them. Re-traumatizing this teenager. Oof.
Yeah. Vengeance is a complicated moral subject, but certainly I can understand.
And in
Re-traumatizing these other kids. Ooh, I understand why you felt you had to, but
one ending in particular, the axe ending,
yeah, I got the axe ending.
it's my favorite ending. Do you want
It
to
was
tell
great.
me what happens in
Yeah,
the axe
so
ending?
I'm playing through this horror-toned visual novel point-and-click puzzle game. I'm getting mildly irritated at the speed at which the game plays itself the first time round. I'm like, come on, I read faster than this, but it's
Yeah,
fine.
in replays, you can actually skip straight through,
Right,
like, speed through dialogue that's
which
already
makes it
happened,
much
but you
easier to
can't do it
understand.
the first time round.
Yeah, but discovering the fast forward feature was like, oh, now I understand how you are expected to play this multiple times to get endings because it's not actually this hours of dialogue
Not
at
that slow every
regular
time,
pace
yeah.
every time. But I'm having a nice time. This seems like it is aimed at maybe like 14-year-olds, and therefore the puzzles are a little simplistic, even as game puzzles go. But it's fine. I'm having a good time. Oh my goodness, I have been completely axe murdered out of nowhere. I'm just like, this feels like it's 2/3 of the way through the thing. We've got a few more puzzle rooms to go. Nope, no puzzle rooms for you. I have been axe murdered.
You have.
It's so good. Just like,
By
and
whom
I
have
knew
you
it
been
was a
axe
game with
murdered,
multiple
Duck?
endings, so I knew it wasn't like this is just how the game ends, which would have been a very different experience. But I was like, oh, this is good actually. This is the favorite thing that's happened to me so far in this game is that I'm pootling along being a somewhat bumbling, puzzle-solving kid with no particular motivation, and I have been axe murdered.
By whom have you been axe murdered, Duck?
Clover. I have been
Clover?
axe murdered by Clover, who has spent the first half of the game putting a brave face on everything, and then her brother gets killed. Or at least we all believe so,
Yeah.
because we have found a corpse wearing his clothes. And well, we found a exploded corpse wearing his clothes.
Mhm.
Um, and she has murdered the people she has calculated must have been responsible for mathematical who could have opened the door reasons, and then just kills Junpei for good measure. She just goes around the bed and starts axe murdering everyone, and we presume then tries to continue on and escape using the like door pass bracelets that she's picked up off everyone. But we don't get to see it because we have been axe murdered.
Yep.
She's
Crucially,
so valid.
you cannot find out that Snake is not actually dead until the penultimate room.
Right. In
in the
order to be
entire game.
axe murdered, you do not know that he is not dead. She does not know that he is not dead. You can't find that out on this pathway.
No, because you get murdered before you
You get
can.
murdered before you get that far.
Yeah. I love the axe ending. I also love that in subsequent endings you get plenty of opportunities to comfort Clover, not be near Clover, and find Snake.
All of which would help with not being axe murdered by Clover.
Yes. They are quite essential, actually, to you getting to the end of the ship
You need
without
to get her through
being
this extremely traumatizing, re-traumatizing experience in which her brother appears to have been murdered. You need to pay attention to her emotional state, or she will murder you with an axe.
Yep. I love Clover. She's my
It's a good
favorite
moral.
character. It's a good moral. It's also, I would say, a fairly predictable result of re-traumatizing this child and then murdering her brother.
Right. Like, it's not the only way that could have gone, but it shouldn't be a surprise that that's one of the ways that can go.
Probably was a surprise to Akane, because this isn't going to be one of the playthroughs she remembers, because,
But she doesn't
incinerated in
remember
this
this
one.
happening the first time.
Um,
Because it didn't happen the first time, because she got to the incinerator.
but I would say it's probably, at least in the axe ending, which isn't the true ending, in inverted commas, probably something that Clover's going to be, like, gets to the end and finds her brother alive and well and
Right,
finds
if
out
she
she
actually
killed
does
all those
escape, she'll just
people
be
for
like, and also
nothing.
I murdered those 3 people. Yeah.
Well, if she
Gets to the
escapes,
end,
she finds Snake.
finds
So she
Snake
murdered
alive,
those people for nothing.
just be like, yeah, some shit happened when I was a kid, and then some more shit happened when I was a slightly older kid, and I did murder some people with an axe. And I feel bad about that. I feel like she would feel bad about that. Strikes me as who she is as a person, someone who would feel bad about that.
To an extent, there is some similarity also with the Akane and Santa relationship, but primarily I'm looking at Snake and Clover and Connor and Zoe. When I
Sure.
say I think these both have some hallmarks of incredibly traumatic experience that makes you doubt your reality, doubt your place in the world, and then come out of the other side of it never really being able to hold on to those things in a solid way again.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it alters the reality that everyone else takes for granted.
Yeah. And in in a High School Musical setting, that could be the reality that your brother loved you. And in a horror-themed visual novel setting, that could be the fact that you, as a little girl, were capable of killing a bunch of people with an axe if sufficiently provoked.
Hmm.
And you're not going to tell anyone that. You're just going to sit on that for the rest of your life. Whichever of those things it is, you're
Right.
just going
When
to hold
people
on to
say,
it.
"What's wrong with you?" you're not going to say, "I'm an axe murderer,"
Yeah.
because either people think you're making a joke, which feels worse than not saying anything, or they believe you, which also is worse than not saying anything because now they all think you're an axe murderer, which is true but doesn't do wonders for your friendships.
Yes. You also can't really tell people my brother who killed himself when he was 17 never loved me.
Right. It really brings the tone of the conversation not down in the sense of brings down the tone, but I mean it drops cold water onto whatever conversation you were having. If people are like, "How are you doing?" You're like, "Well, I've been thinking a lot about my brother. He's dead and he never loved me."
Yeah. It's one of those things that you either have to have a real run up to or just not bring up.
Right. It does not make good dinner time conversation.
Much like being an axe murderer.
You cannot bring it up on a first date, much like being an axe murderer.
Yeah. I think maybe this isn't going to be my smoothest segue, but that's similar to the relationships between the other people in these, adult and child alike. Um, there's a lot of questions, I think, in how much you can reasonably expect of other people.
Yeah.
And in Dear Evan Hansen, you should be, but her brother maybe can't. And we don't get a clear answer on how Connor feels about Zoe because we don't get to know Connor. But we are, I think, invited to take seriously the question, did Connor love his sister? Because he was going through it. And it's hard to
Yeah.
have the space for those kinds of emotions when the existential horror of dealing with your addiction and your mental health is all you really have the mental capacity for.
Yeah. And there's a gulf between hating someone and having to share a house with them while you're going through it.
Yeah.
it may not make a big difference in how you treat them.
Yeah.
But it's a very different internal environment, which when it comes to something like a sibling relationship, if Connor had lived in 20 years' time, you were really shit to me for 2 or 3 years there while you were dealing with your addiction, is something that siblings can reasonably expect to, at some point, talk about and come to terms with.
Yeah.
If he doesn't hate you, but
And
you're
if
never
he's
going to
alive.
know whether you could have had that conversation because he did die. It's that it is the nature of grief that part of the loss of a person is the loss of all of the future conversations you could have had, understandings you could have come to.
Yeah. And
When
I
someone
think
dies, you don't lose your past. You lose the future with them. And
exactly.
the tragedy of Dear Evan Hansen is that from Evan using her grief to manipulate her and lying about having known her brother, he also manages to ruin the past.
Yeah. Similarly to how we were talking about with the parents, they sort of got this ray of hope that was taken away from them. I don't think we really know if the relationship that they have with their dead son, because I don't think you cease to have a relationship with someone when they die, they just cease to be at the other end of it. If that relationship has been sort of unchangeably damaged by the Evan Hansen situation.
Right. Whether that same doubt of did we ever know him? What was he actually like?
If we were capable of falling for this lie by a child who didn't know him, did we have
Yeah.
any real right to say we knew him? If
If
we
we were
couldn't tell
able
the
to
difference
believe,
between him and an imaginary friend.
we couldn't tell the difference between him and an imaginary friend. We found it easy to believe that he had a whole years long, deep, intense, intimate friendship with someone who we'd never heard of, because that was how little we talked and how little we knew about his life.
Yeah. And I think to a lesser extent, this is true of the minor characters in Dear Evan Hansen as well. This question of like, well, what can we make of our relationships now that this has happened? So we talked briefly about Alana.
Mhm.
One of the things with Alana is she doesn't lie at any point, but she convinces herself that Connor's death is important and that she and Evan are going to create something out of it that will make the world better through a
Yeah,
GoFundMe campaign and a tree. Um, in a way that's very 17.
it's a very 17.
And she actually does really briefly, she's the only person who figures out through just, like, detective legwork that Evan is clearly lying.
Yeah, there's date stamps and things on the emails that she puts together can't be real.
Yeah, and Evan convinces her otherwise by showing her, and sending her a copy of the so-called suicide note, actually his letter to himself, which she then puts on the internet for everybody to see.
Yeah, which is part
Um,
of how it goes viral, is that she's put this bit, which was always a piece of creative writing from Evan. Like that's
yeah,
what it was. And when he wrote it, it wasn't a lie.
yeah,
Because when he wrote it, it was a therapy letter to himself
yeah,
that gets reframed as if it was from Connor. But yeah, she takes it and she puts it on the internet, and it probably all would have been a bit less, at least publicly explosive, if she hadn't done that.
mhm, and I have to question, after everything comes out, what does Alana's reality look like, and does she have any salvageable friendships or relationships in her life
Yeah.
after she's been part of this elaborate lie and done the, to be fair, deeply unethical thing of sharing somebody's suicide note on the internet without the consent of their like living loved ones?
Yes. She is not without blame for deciding to share it without anyone's agreement, just because I think it's that the fundraising campaign is slowing down a little, so she
Yeah,
puts this up to sort of re-enliven it,
revitalize it. Yeah,
which is not a good thing to do with
don't
someone's
do that
suicide note
for
that
the
was
record.
not yours to share.
But,
Um,
like, Alana, like Connor's family, has created this sort of intangible relationship through trauma, not between her and Connor, but almost more between her and Evan.
yes, she's
And
kind
they
of
do bond throughout the show. And she's also one of the people left in the fallout of this lie going, wait, what was my relationship with you ever?
yes. I thought I had found a friend through the death of this other person, and you've been using me this whole time, and Now everyone knows it's a lie, which means everyone else is going to think that I was in on it,
Yeah.
which isn't true. Like, she was, as far as she knew, until she figured it
She was
out.
doing a different unethical thing.
Exactly. She was taking someone else's tragedy, making it about her, violating people's, private griefs in order to keep the attention going and the movement going, because she wanted to feel like she was involved and that she was doing something. None of this is great, but she wasn't lying. People are going to think that she was in on it as a hoax. Yeah, I don't. And we're shown, I believe, that she was also sort of fairly lonely to start with.
Yeah.
But she's not going to make any friends out of this. This is not going to
No.
help with that. And we don't see her in the epilogue. We don't know what's going on with Alana.
And this is all to say nothing of the relationship between Evan Hansen and his mum, which we talked a little bit about Good For You, the song where everybody gets to say, hey, Evan Hansen, you suck. Even Jared is
Even
like, yeah, you've
Jared is in
ruined
on
our
it.
friendship. But I would say the main parts and probably the most powerful parts of that are Evan's mum and Zoe. Zoe we've covered. Evan's mum gets to say in that song, like, I'm sorry, you have made up this entire elaborate lie. You have inserted yourself into another family because what? We weren't rich enough? I wasn't home enough because I was at work? Like, what are
Yeah.
you getting out of this that I'm not giving you as your mother?
Yeah.
And it
It's like, go
really
on.
it really stings, to be honest.
It's quite a vicious song.
It's pretty brutal.
Yeah, I mean, I think because we get a lot of follow up from that. Like, that's almost the last we hear of Alana.
Yeah.
But we get a whole nother song sequence with Evan's mum of her going through an anecdote about when his dad left,
Yeah.
and just
It's a horrible
reiterating.
song, but, you know,
It's probably the worst song in the thing,
it's the
honestly.
weakest song in the whole musical.
Um, but the content of it is that I am not going to leave you, and I will always be here and be your mother.
Yeah. And that's the only relationship in his life
That he
that
hasn't blown up.
he hasn't completely obliterated with this lie.
Yeah,
And she's still pretty unhappy. Like, she'll
she's still
always be there
mad at
for
him.
him because she's
She's
his
just
mother,
like,
but she's not happy.
yeah, it's a song that is like, I am very cross with you. I am not going to abandon you, because that's what parenthood is for me.
Yeah. And
But she
while
is
it's
still very cross with him.
yeah, and while it's I would say, not a good song, um, it is sort of quite healing to have this moment at the end of not the very end, it's not the last song. The last song is Evan's self-acceptance song, which is also pretty weak, to be honest. But as a sort of last lingering emotional beat, I would say,
Yeah.
it is a nice moment of, okay, he's blown up everything in his life, but someone will get him through it.
Yes, he's not actually alone. He does still have a mother who loves him.
And I think one of the questions that invites you to ask is, okay, what relationships can and can't survive?
Yeah. What does June have at the end of this?
Yeah, that's the thing is at the end of Zero Escape, June and Santa escape having taken Ace hostage. I assume they're killing him. I don't know. It would be weird if they didn't. But maybe they think it would be more embarrassing for him to face trial or something. I have no idea. It's not confirmed that they kill him. We do actually find out more about what happened after this one in the sequels, but I'm not including it in my
Not relevant
analysis.
here. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, because some of it is very silly. But like she goes off with Santa and like Junpei and June were childhood best friends and she just disappeared one day and he was left with no closure on that. He grew up, he sort of forgot about her until this entire thing happened.
Yeah, it's
All
not
of
meant to
the
be
others,
traumatic. It's they were at primary school together, and then at secondary school they presumably went to different schools.
yeah, but it's meant that she seemed to just kind of vanish one day
Yeah.
in a way that like almost does represent, even though it wasn't a traumatic experience, it represents what would have happened if she
Yes,
had
it is
actually
very
died in
much
that
just a,
fire.
I just never saw you again.
Yeah. And then she pops up, does this deranged thing, and then vanishes
Yeah,
again.
does this deranged thing. He has to save her 9-year-old self through psychic powers in the past,
Yeah. And like
which
all of
is
these other
very traumatic
people.
in itself, because if you don't save her 9-year-old self, she's going to burn to death, and you will never have had this friend in the first place, and she will have been dead this whole time.
Yeah. And, like, all of the others, I mean, we mentioned they're all being, like, brought back to this. Some of them weren't in the game, so, like Lotus, whose kids were, and Seven, who rescued a couple of people who, like, escaped. They're being put through this traumatic experience that someone they know went through.
Yeah.
Ace is sort of almost satisfyingly being put through the thing he put innocent children through. Clover and Snake are just straightforwardly being re-traumatized.
Yeah. I don't think they're ever going to
Santa
speak to you again, June.
Santa and June are re-traumatizing themselves.
Santa probably will speak to you again, but like you're none of this is not helping your mental health.
And that's the thing. I think that the relationship that June goes away still having is with her brother, but it's one that she's soured almost impossibly
Yeah, and not just
because there
through
was
that.
nothing else she could do. She's made him
Yeah,
do this thing to a lot of people and to himself because otherwise she was gonna die.
yeah, and it's not just the relationship between June and Santa has not just been soured by this 12 hours on a fake boat doing
No,
traumatic
it's
experiment.
everything before
It's
that.
it's the last 10 years of bringing this situation into being.
And the game is pretty clear that Santa and June weren't exactly co-conspirators. He's described as her secretary.
Yeah, this is her idea. She's masterminding it, and he has to go along with it because otherwise she stays dead.
He's been given a choice. You can have a dead sister who was incinerated in front of you because of an admin error, or you can have a supervillain sister who you have to work for and traumatize all of these people who
Yeah,
didn't deserve it, some of whom were there with you, went through all of that with you, and most of whom did nothing wrong.
yeah.
Those are your options. You don't get a nice sister who doesn't do that.
You either get your childhood trauma in which your sister died, or you get your childhood trauma and perpetrator trauma for having done it all over again, but then your sister didn't die the first time. Like,
And
it's not a good set of choices here.
and this leads me from my what are relationships and what can they survive point to my sort of not quite last point, but I think last major thematic point,
Hmm.
which is I think that in a really fundamental way, both of these are stories about the what ifs that go through your head when you lose someone.
Yeah.
This might be a little bit personal for a podcast, but I'm comfortable saying I lost a loved one almost exactly 2 months ago as we record.
Hmm.
It's been kind of emotionally a lot to watch and play and
Yeah, it
read
would be.
about these properties. Um, and I think honestly, something that happens when you lose someone you love is it's not just the grief you feel that day, it's the grief you feel when you see a restaurant you wish they could go to with you. It's the
Yeah,
grief you feel when you want to phone them up and tell them something that happened that day, and you pick up your phone and you can't because they're not at the other end anymore.
yeah. It's the oh, that'd make a great Christmas present.
Yeah. And even when you lose someone in a completely natural and unpreventable way, you will spend a lot of time afterwards thinking, if I had done something different, would they have gotten, an extra day, an extra week, an extra year, an extra decade?
Yeah. Was there some help I could have got them?
Could I
Was
have
there
made it
something I could
easier?
have done differently?
Could I have made it less painful, even if they had to go? Could I have given them more with the time we had together? And both of these in different ways, one through these elaborate sequences of Evan imagining what a friendship with Connor could have been like. And I think not just in a selfish way of I could have had this friend, but in the sense of I could have been the person who made a little bit of his short life worth living.
Yeah, he's imagining a version of himself who was a good friend to someone.
And also in 999, this sort of play acting world that Santa is stuck in for the period between the first and second nonary game, where he's in a years long what if of could I have saved my baby sister from dying in this horrible way?
Yeah. And it
Can
turns out the
I
answer is yes, but you're not going to like the method.
who does he have to be the person who could have saved her because he was supposed to have been the person who could save her. He was supposed to be in the other facility.
Looking at the answers. Yeah.
he knew what a Sudoku was. He was older. He could have saved it. He could have solved it and he could have saved her. And that was taken away from him. And it's completely unjust. And he has to live with that. And he has to think about it every day. Could I have saved her? Could I have saved her? And the answer is no. Junpei can save her.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
can't
it's
just
gotta
put
really
Santa
sting that you
into
can't
a
just
Sudoku
that you there's
box
no situation
and
you
put her
can
into
put
place.
yourself in where you can save her. That's gotta sting.
And
Like,
I think
this kid she knew for a couple of years at school, that's who can save her.
that's something that both of these properties are in dialogue with. It's the what if that you are left with when somebody passes away, and in particular when somebody dies tragically and suddenly and young,
Yeah.
because there's a whole lifetime of potential that was taken away that you as the living person have to carry around.
Yeah, you have to go on living in the world that they're not in, which is not easy.
And all of the things I've said about what these have in common are things that I think grief always has, which is you can't really talk to people a lot of the time because you're
Yeah.
supposed to stop. You feel like you're supposed to stop talking and thinking about grief at a certain point. But really, the version of me that lost someone when I was 16 is the same version of me that lost someone 2 months ago. And both of those griefs are still just as big inside of me. It's just that one of them is on my mind more. It never
Yeah.
stops being something you're carrying.
No, you get used to it, but that's not the same as it changing.
And your relationship with that person is never going to get less complicated, and you're never going to get to find out if you could have fixed your relationship and salvaged it and put to rest anything that came between you. And you're never going to be able to apologize to them for things that you did or ask them to apologize to you for things that they did. And the ultimate thing is there isn't any what if you can go back and fix. There's just the ending that you got.
Yeah. Zero Escape has 6 or 7 endings depending on the version. Only one of them is canonical. Only one of them's the real one. All the rest of them are what ifs.
Yeah. I didn't think I was going to find any commonality between these two, and then I went and looked at them again
And
and
then
went,
it
"Oh
turns
yeah,
out that they are, in fact, entirely about grief. Yeah.
they're both entirely about grieving someone gone before their time."
Yeah.
But that's a
And the
bummer. So
imagined
do you want to
version.
hear a funny version?
I want to hear the funny version. Having made ourselves quite sad.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
want to end the series on the
We
note
don't.
of like,
This is not a series that can end on a solemn note. That's not who we are. Give me the bullshit version of this comparison.
okay, so I have a couple of questions.
Okay, shoot.
Um, musicals,
Yep.
video games, both media that you're familiar with.
Uh huh.
I would say that they are both, and this does still tie into my overall point, it's just the more light-hearted version of it.
Uh huh.
I would say that these are both, in a way, they are both media that make the internal external.
Yes. Absolutely.
Um,
The classic form of, like, there are some exceptions. There are absolutely musicals where what is being sung is dialogue. The classic form of what's going on in a musical is everyone breaks into song, and we do literally a big song and dance about the feelings that I am feeling right now. This does not take place within the narrative. This happens sort of in a little pocket universe inside my emotional life where I tell you all about it. And then we
yeah.
go back to the real universe and resume having the outward form of things.
This is
Um,
why there's like a classic musical theatre maxim, which is that when you can't speak for emotion, you sing, and when you can't sing for emotion, you dance. No one dances much in Dear Evan Hansen except in fantasy sequences, which is actually really notable.
yeah.
Um,
It's not a big chorus dancing musical.
and I think that's partly because the emotions that are too big for them to hold in speech that come out in song are emotions that are stifling. It's
Yes.
grief, it's unrequited love,
Yeah.
it's
When you are too
being a
grieved,
kid with a mental illness.
right. When you are too excited to sing, yeah, maybe you dance. When you are overcome with grief and can't sing, it's not a dancing time. That's a
It,
being very still time.
yeah. And I think this is something that I also think is true of good genre fiction. Um, and horror in particular. Also, I think this is true of a lot of fantasy and sci-fi, but I'm going to focus on horror with
Yeah.
sci-fi edges.
It's the relevant point to the works
Yeah.
we watched for this.
Um, when you are in a horror movie, You are allowed to have extreme reactions to things that are happening to you.
And when you are in a video game, you are allowed to murder people.
You are allowed to murder people. Um,
Not, which is a trite way of putting it, but like in the
there's
video
no
game, you are allowed
consequences to
to
your actions.
not just that. It's in in the same way as in the musical scenario. You have a way to express these oversized emotions that you can't have in normal conversation. In the video game, you can go on a vengeance quest.
Yeah.
Which is not something that in real life you can do because that's called murder and it is bad.
And well, also in a video game, what I kind of mean by there are no consequences because everything that happens is built in. A video game has been specifically designed to give you options of things you can do. That's
Yeah.
not true in real life.
No.
Like, if I want to
In real life, you cannot go
attack
back
somebody
and
with an
play the other
axe,
path.
I don't have to select attack somebody with an axe from my list of options. I just have to pick up an axe out of the infinite number of things I could do with my hands.
But also,
I mean, I have to find an axe, but,
having murdered someone with an axe, you cannot then reset to the beginning of the level and do something else.
And also, what I sort of mean
You
by that
can't be
is,
like, I'm going to make the bad choice just to see how it plays out, and then I'm going to go back and do the canonical version, which is where I get the good ending.
and also when you're in a video game, you know that somebody's sat down and thought about the choices, so you can't really be getting it wrong.
Right, if you decide to take the I do the axe murder path, there'll be an ending that is designed to flow from that.
Yeah, you can't really play a video game wrong. You can be bad at it, but you can't
I
do it in a
frequently
way that
am.
isn't supposed to happen.
Right, I could be bad at the video game, but fundamentally, if I fall off the cliff and get smushed, that was what the game was designed to do. I didn't
Yeah,
do the game wrong, I just, fell off a cliff. I
and,
didn't
like, I
break the
think
video game.
horror video games give you a real especially this kind, which is about sort of, dark secrets and bringing things out of the woodwork and all of that.
Yeah,
Um, I mentioned to you earlier that I've recently been reading, like, some, horror fiction about people processing grief. Those kinds of stories, what they're designed to do, in a way, is to take what it feels like to be going through that process and turn it into an external thing that you can confront.
yeah, yeah. Like, one of the things about, one of the things video games are good for is things like turning the concept of that thing you are afraid of into a monster you can fight. Because
Yeah.
most of the things in the real world that are threatening to you and your happiness are not things that you can murder with an axe.
Yeah,
In
like,
a video game, especially a horror video game, the concept of grief can be a giant scorpion that you kill with an axe.
in this case, the concept of grief can be a long and meandering passage through a series of escape rooms, but you can still come out the other end and it's just over. The game's
Right.
ended.
You can
You
beat
won.
it.
You
You
won
can
against the
find
concept of
you
grief.
can find the escape.
Yeah. And I think both of these are properties that are doing something interesting with their medium to talk about grief. In Dear Evan Hansen, there's no dancing. In Zero Escape, there's no bad guy. Like, technically,
Yeah.
there's Ace, but, like, he's really
But
ineffective.
he's not responsible. Well, he
He
is a
didn't
bad
do this.
guy, but he did not set up this situation.
No,
The person
he's
who
one
set
of the
up this
victims. He just
situation.
sucks.
Yeah, exactly. The person who set up this situation put him in it as a form of vengeance, but he did not volunteer for this. He did not set this up, and he doesn't really know. Like, he knows a lot more than you as Junpei know, but
So does everyone.
in terms of like things that have happened in the past, he doesn't know what's happening now.
Yeah, and also the people who know about what happened in the past, it kind of blows up in some of their faces, literally.
Knowing doesn't necessarily help.
Uh-huh. And also, like, this is a very self-contained game where the bad guy is not a bad guy. It's a scared little girl who just doesn't want to die in a fire.
Which is understandable. It's very hard to,
And also,
disapprove of
crucially,
that.
it's a point and click escape game where the big end puzzle that is really important is like a really easy Sudoku. Like, the hard mode on the Sudoku app I have on my phone is harder than this. And it goes up to, like, super extreme or something.
Right, well, those situations where you have, small, medium, large, and then 6 more sizes above that, but for video game hardness.
Yeah, it's like, this
You
is
have
not a difficult
regular,
puzzle at the end.
hard, very hard, extremely hard, super hard, legendary.
Yeah, it's like, this is not a difficult Sudoku at the end. It's not really a climactic moment where you solve the Sudoku.
Right, it's
Um,
hard. Like, I understand that contextually it is against the clock, and contextually it's a very tense situation, but also tensely and heroically solving a Sudoku doesn't really flow.
no. And I think the lack of either a bad guy or a sort of,
There's no
whatever
monster
the
at the end of this
fiddly
story.
puzzle version of a boss battle is, it's not like a super hard puzzle that it takes all of your clues from previous playthroughs to come together to solve in any way.
Yeah,
Just
that surprised
Sudoku.
me. That it's not. You don't collect all of these longer term plot clues and then put them together to solve the real puzzle at the end. You collect those to understand the story, but the puzzle at the end is just its own puzzle, and it's a Sudoku, and it's
Yeah.
straightforward.
And that negation of tropes of the media, and also in some ways forms of the medium, um,
Uh-huh.
I think is very similar to the A, the lack of dancing, and B, the lack of, like, a lot of crowd work, a lot of chorus stuff in Dear Evan Hansen.
Yeah, Dear Evan
It's
Hansen really refuses to give you the things you expect from a musical,
I think
including a happy
the
ending.
unsatisfyingness and the misery and the grief of both of these stories have polluted the medium. They're not capable of being these things that are associated with making you happy. You don't think of musicals
Yeah.
and video games as being
The
tragedies.
themes have escaped containment and turned back on themselves, and now it's a strange musical and a sad game.
I loved playing this game. I wouldn't say it made me happy. I think it, like, especially recently replaying it, it made me cry for like hours.
Right. Catharsis, however, is a known human emotion.
Yeah. I didn't cry for hours after watching Dear Evan Hansen because I don't think it's that good. But that's not really Dear Evan Hansen's fault. I'm sure it would have made someone else cry for hours because it's a tragedy. It's
I feel like
sad.
I feel like part of the reason you didn't cry for hours after watching Dear Evan Hansen is that you're not 17.
Exactly. If I
Like,
was
there's a fundamental
17,
separation. If you were 17 and had lost a classmate recently, you probably would cry for hours at Dear Evan Hansen.
oh, buckets. And yeah, um, whereas 999 hit for me because I've recently lost somebody in a very similar way to the way I did lose somebody a decade ago.
Yeah.
That is
And
just a
then
true fact.
the presence of a resonance, which is something that 999 is doing, is saying these things have happened before and will happen again and they resonate. It's going to be relevant. If it is relevant, and it's therefore going to have more of an emotional impact.
And I think people it's not a novel idea that, like, video games cannot be fun or musicals can be depressing. Like, I'm aware of Pathologic and Les Miserables, but feel free
You
to
have heard
email
of these
me.
works.
But, like, just to be clear, I know they exist. Um, I think it is interesting that both of these are doing something that is a little bit different to what you expect going into them. You expect video games to be fun and have a satisfying ending where you do a big thing. And you expect musicals to be big and show-stopping, and even if they're sad musicals, to be, like, emotionally not necessarily uplifting, but, like, arousing. They're supposed to create big emotions.
Yeah, Les Mis doesn't have a happy ending, but it does have all of the chorus, more or less as Ghost, coming on to sing a big, thumping, "There Will Be a Heaven" song.
It's triumphant. Dear Evan
Right,
Hansen's
right. It's
ending is just
everyone's dead,
bleak.
but they are triumphantly dead.
The ending of Dear Evan Hansen is bleak. It's this kid has no one left in his life but his mother, and he's gonna live with that guilt forever, and everyone around him is probably traumatized by this.
Everyone thinks he sucks. They're probably right. That's the
And
message of
that
Dear
has
Evan Hansen.
corrupted the medium. It's changed it from being a musical to being something fundamentally different to other musicals. It's a musical where the crowd don't come together about anything because these people can't come together anymore because one of them's dead. It's a musical where nobody dances because nobody has the
Yeah,
energy of emotion to make them dance. It's a musical where you don't get a big cathartic ending song. You've just got a guy alone in an orchard saying, "I think I'll be okay eventually."
yeah.
And with 999, it's a game where you play the
You
same
stop and pick
puzzles
up
over and
Egyptian
over and
pizza.
over and over and over, and you get to the ending and you solve everything, and then you have to do a really anticlimactic, fiddly number puzzle against the clock, and then it just ends. with a load of loose ends and a weird Egyptian priestess that you picked up by the side of the road, and the person who made all of this happen is like an innocent kid who you can't really bring yourself to hate and just disappears into thin air anyway, so it doesn't matter. You don't get closure from either
You
of
never
these
get an
media.
explanation, which, not to get all, serious again, but you don't get an explanation for trauma.
You don't.
You
It just
don't
happens
get
to you,
you
and you
don't
have
get
to
a
deal with it.
ribbon around it that says this is why this happened. This is the narratively satisfying consequence of it having happened. Stuff happens to you, and then tomorrow it's Tuesday and you get on with it.
You've just got to drive home from Nevada now.
Yeah.
I hope they gave you your passport
Yeah.
when they
You
kidnapped
have
you.
you have the worst day of your life, and then you're in Nevada,
Or you're standing in an
and
orchard.
or you're in an orchard, or you know, the alarm clock goes off, and well, you've had your 2 days bereavement leave, so back to work with you.
Yeah. And like, you might get
Lydia
something down the
Time is a
line.
tyrant.
You might get something to make you feel a bit better. You might get a funeral where you can have a cry and get some closure. You might get to, you know, look back and
You might get
talk about
therapy.
it with a therapist. You might even be lucky and something like vaguely positive you can look at and go, oh, well, at least there's an orchard now, or at least that kid's alive now. But you aren't ever going to not be the person who woke up that day and had to live through that whole day, and
Yeah.
you're now stuck with it.
It's never gonna unhappen.
Yeah.
Even when you're not thinking about it, it's still something that happened.
And
And
because of that, it can't be the same thing it started out as anymore. It
yeah,
can't be a musical anymore. It can't be a video game anymore. It's been fundamentally changed by grief.
yeah. But both of these are works about not being able to go back and have a different past
Yeah.
and trying to do it anyway.
Yay.
We found this is you worked like some really deep and meaningful connections between this Nintendo DS game and this Broadway musical. Like, we gave you a really nasty assignment, and I think you have like triumphed.
I think I have. Honestly, I think this was better than some coursework I did at university.
Yeah, this was strong.
We've talked about medium, we've talked about grief, we've talked about themes. We didn't even touch on one of my notes, which just said extremely pointless cruelty, lol.
I'm sure we'll get to that in another episode.
Yeah, some other highlights from my notes just going, Dear Evan Hansen has no psychics in the contrast section.
You're correct. A psychic would have really changed the plot of Dear Evan Hansen.
Dear Evan Hansen, but with psychics, would also be a great story, to be fair.
Honestly, Dear Evan Hansen, but with a real ghost, would be incredible.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
to be clear, he is still absolutely lying,
Yeah.
but there is the real Connor's ghost being like, I am not like that. I was never like that. I kind of wish I had been like that.
I would have loved to have a friendship that like made me feel better about life, but like maybe if I had had that, I wouldn't be a ghost. So could
Right.
you
I
quit?
would have loved to have been the person who would have written you that letter.
Yeah, but I wasn't. I sucked.
But I
And
wasn't, and
stop
now I'm
telling my
dead, and I'm
sister
going to
I was a
haunt you
better person
about it.
than I was.
Right, going to haunt you about it.
Yeah, but yeah,
And that wraps up
that wraps it up.
season one.
I love extremifying genres. It's like the thing that maybe most draws me to fiction is when it takes something that I feel and makes it seem like a real thing in the world. So I think I'm really happy with how we've closed this off, and I'm really glad that it's our finale. It went really well.
It went great.
When we suggested the compare and contrast, I really thought I was pairing like, Ivanhoe to the concept of herring.
Which I'm sure you would have done a sterling job with, but might have been less thematically connected.
Yeah, I think we've ended on a high note.
I'm very pleased with how this whole project has gone. I think this is a great podcast that I would love to listen to.
This has been incredibly good fun. If you have stuck with us, because this is a longer one, because we had a lot more explaining to do.
Yeah.
If you stuck with us from episode 1, we love you. You're incredible. Thank you for being our friends, because I don't think anyone who wasn't our friend listened to episode 1 to begin with.
We have a social, not even a parasocial relationship. We have a direct social relationship with our most loyal listeners.
Yep. I still
Shout out to
occasionally
you guys. I'm not doxing you, but you know who you are.
I still occasionally get like out of the blue texts after an episode goes up, telling me whether they agree or disagree.
Yep.
Shout out to our first reviewer. You know who you are. We love you. We appreciate you.
You are our favorite.
Thank you to everybody who has rated, listened, shared it with other people. It's the end of the series, so I just wanted to say, like, we do see all of it, and we really appreciate you,
Yeah, we read
even if
all of the
you're a flat
comments and we treasure them.
earther. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for being along for the ride. This isn't the end of the show. This is just the end of the first series, but we both want to take a break and go watch movies we
We're going to
wanted
take
to
a couple of
watch.
months to just, enjoy media for its own sake.
Yeah.
Um,
We do have
and
some
then we
bonus
will be back.
content planned.
Yeah, which we will drop as and when we create it.
Yeah. Analysis Roulette will return to the airwaves.
We'll return at a not yet specified time, probably in the summer.
Probably in the summer, depending on how long we can contain ourselves before we feel the need to talk about Lightlark.
So speaking of bonus content,
Yeah.
I've got an idea.
Okay.
So Lightlark has a sequel,
Yes.
which I believe neither of us has read.
No. I have noticed that it is available as an audiobook on the Libby app.
And I think we had, both of us, a fantastic time doing Lightlark.
Oh, I had an incredible time.
In the spirit of bonus content where we don't have to do a real analysis, should we just read Grimdark or whatever it's called?
I think we should. We've actually discussed a couple of formats for bonus episodes, one of which was for properties that we just kind of want to talk about, but don't really
Yeah.
want to do a like full-scale analysis. We're going to flip a coin for who's going to
Yeah. And
like
do
engage with it,
classic
and then
podcast
do
format. Let me tell you about a thing.
classic podcast format. Let me tell you about a thing. We might be doing a little bit of let me tell you about a Lightlark in the near future.
I think we should do that.
I think we should.
I'm not
It's
going to tell the
probably going
listener
to
when
happen.
that is, because it'll be a little while, because we are also actually taking a break.
We are taking an actual break, but yeah, we will come back. We have also got some potential guest episodes, which will be really fun.
If you, the listener, would like to be a guest, drop us an email. We will seriously consider it.
We will genuinely consider it. If you have ideas for the main show hats, the lists of things that we work with,
That we aren't
whether that is a media property or a school of analysis, we're going to change the schools of analysis up a little bit next time round.
Going to review those. Going to rewrite what's in the list of works. Going to remember that cinema exists.
Yep. Make sure that you've send us an email. You can find our contact details in the show notes below, or if you want to just drop a comment on any of our various outputs. I'm pretty sure Spotify lets you comment, YouTube lets you comment. I have no idea about Pocket Casts and Apple Podcasts, but you can find our email if that's not an option for you.
Listener, I read out the email in the ending credits of the show every time.
If you can't find it in the notes, just keep listening after we stop talking for a minute.
Right, it will be there.
You will hear some dulcet tones reading you our email address.
Mm-hmm.
And as we always say, please remember to share us with anybody who you think would enjoy the podcast, because we really enjoy making it. We really enjoy knowing that people are listening to it. And the more people...
100 views on YouTube was one of the finest hours of my life.
That's absolutely incredible. And if more people know about us, more people can tell us what they think we should do next. And we're definitely open to suggestions.
Yes. Specifically, send us suggestions for things that will cause you psychic damage when we get them wrong.
Yes, those are the best ones. Especially if we have absolutely no idea what they are, so we both have to go and experience them, because those have been some of the real high points.
Yeah. And also, I'm putting in 5 versions of King Arthur.
Oh yeah, the Arthuriana has been great. Yeah, if we're doing a little bit of recap, we've had so much fun with Arthuriana.
Yeah, I don't know if we've even had. I don't think the Arthuriana's had any particular increase in listeners. Possibly even.
Oh no, actually,
it's not
below average.
Yeah, they've not been our most popular episodes, but I've enjoyed them so much that we're going to put a bunch more in the hat.
It's been fun. Yeah, honestly,
we have enjoyed our medieval poetry, and we're going to put Disney's Sword in the Stone in.
I have seen our analytics. I know which episodes perform best. I don't care. If you want me to do a certain type of episode, email me. Make it successful. I ignore that.
Also, because there is, as far as we can tell, no theme.
No, our top episodes are Dwarf Fortress, Lord of the Rings, and Dragon Riders of Pern. So, geeky property, I guess. But that's everything we do because we're geeks.
That's everything we do. I don't know why those things are not the other things.
Yeah. I mean, I know why Lord of the Rings. It's because you gave it a clickbait title.
And it worked. I don't know what your problem is. We got a lot of people commenting on Lord of the Rings to tell us that, yes, it is good. You're so wrong. Like, yeah, you listened to the first 2 minutes, did not hear us say, we know it's good, and got mad
Yeah,
at us.
we were
It's the
very clear
devil.
about that.
We were very clear
We
about that.
did actually make sure people knew we thought Lord of the Rings was good, but you did have to listen to
That
more
was.
than 20 seconds of the episode to
It was,
find
it
that
was
out.
really the theme and conclusion of the episode was that it was actually as good as people say.
Yeah, unfortunately, despite our
People did
best
not listen
efforts,
to
we could
the
not
episode.
find that much wrong with it. But people did
We
not
looked
stick
real
around to
hard.
find out.
Which is my fault because I gave it a clickbait title suggesting it might be bad.
Yeah, I want to be clear, that was I
That
was
was me.
not
It was my
involved in
fault.
the clickbait.
Nope. Okay, listener,
Um,
we've been going for a couple of hours and we both need to stop. So
yeah. So, yeah, with a final heartfelt thank you to all of you for listening.
this has been so much fun, and it is sustainable because we know people do listen, and that makes it worth doing.
Yeah, honestly, like, if you guys weren't here, we would have gotten dissatisfacted and given up. So,
Yeah,
thank
like
you
it's
all
a
for
lot of fun
listening.
to do. It's not so much fun that we would do this much work if we didn't have anyone appreciating it. So thank you for appreciating it and for joining us on this nonsense.
There are so many more of you than I ever thought there would be, and I'm so jazzed that you've all enjoyed what we're doing here.
I like
So,
to
thank you.
imagine you all in my living room, watching me eating mayonnaise out of a jar. That's a Tumblrism
Yeah.
that I will leave in, frankly. I'm not going to
Yeah.
explain that. That's just how it is.
Normally I say don't get into parasocial relationships, it's not good for you, but in this case I will say you are all my best friend, and I love all of you.
Yes. We have a
Actually,
parasocial
this
relationship
time
with you, whether you like it or not.
This time the relationship is in some ways matched because we have an equally weird relationship with our audience as they have with us.
we love and treasure you, and also do not know your names.
All right. I think that's a wrap.
You've been listening to Analysis Roulette, a podcast applying a randomly selected mode of analysis to a randomly selected creative work, just to see what happens. Your hosts have been Dear and Duck. You can find us on Spotify or on YouTube, and if you'd like to get in touch, you can send us an email at analysisroulette@gmail.com. And remember, if you like our show, share it with your friends, and if you don't like our show, share it with your enemies. Thanks.